Hello, everyone. We're back again. This is part 4 of our Neurodivergent Thinkers series offered by Western Washington University's Counseling Center. In this session, we're going to talk about activities of daily living and how you might be able to provide some support for the neurodivergent thinker in your life when it comes to daily tasks, routines, and providing some support, some things that might be more helpful and a little bit less helpful when it comes to these particular topics. So thanks again for coming back to join us. So when we say activities of daily living, we're speaking to those things that we sort of do routinely every day, ideally. So eating and food, sleep, and physical health related tasks are the ones I'm going to focus on right now, specifically related to neurodivergent folks. And again, just a caveat, we're going to, talk about some research here and, make some generalizations, remembering that every neurodivergent person and thinker is different and may experience some challenges with some of these activities of daily living or may not. So always want to mention that. But when it comes to eating and food, what we see sometimes with some neurodivergent folks is due to some sensory issues, certain textures of foods can be a little much or overwhelming or make somebody want to avoid certain categories of food. Also, if somebody has a really strong sense of routine and structure, that can also kind of translate to food and maybe eating very similar, the same things, at least for a little while, or just wanting to have a pretty regimented schedule for eating. On the other hand, a side effect of some stimulant medications for some of our folks with variable attention or ADHD can create a loss of appetite. There's also a phenomenon of hyperfocus where you might get so into something that you just forget to eat in the first place. So that is also something that can happen related to this daily activity of eating, might be a little bit more challenging because of some of those factors. When it comes to sleep, we've got some pretty good research on this, that people who have ADHD and autism specifically, thinking about those aspects of neurodivergence, just struggle with sleep more. That's just what the research shows us. So getting to sleep is harder, staying asleep is harder. And so this is something just to be aware of, because we're just pretty understanding that sleep is vital. It's really impactful in terms of the rest of our lives, our physical health, our mental health overall. So when somebody is struggling with sleep, that can be just really detrimental. So something I work on sometimes with some of my clients related to sleep is this concept of sleep hygiene. So you can just Google that. You'll get a ton of resources on the internet. It's some of these concepts around, powering down certain devices an hour before you go to sleep, having a sleep area that's really comfortable for you and is free of distractions. So there are some ways we can work with some of these tricky aspects of sleep for our neurodivergent thinkers. All right. So physical health can encompass a lot, but we're going to narrow our focus when we chat right now to things like exercise and maintaining hygiene. So when we talk about hygiene, we're talking about showering, brushing your teeth, taking medications. So attending to these things can be hard for all of us, regardless of our neurotype. Really want to name that. But exercise in particular, when we talk about that, can be really helpful, particularly for folks with ADHD. There's been some pretty good research on that. That exercise can be pretty essential, especially if there's that more like hyperactive aspect of ADHD. Exercise can be really vital. When we think about hygiene, something interesting to note is I co-facilitate a group for neurodivergent thinkers on campus here at Western. And things like brushing your teeth seem to come up every quarter that we have the group in terms of like the challenges of it for some people, just because it's pretty boring. You have to stand still. So for some of our folks with more variable attention brains, it can be hard to, remember to brush your teeth in the first place, but then once you're brushing them, it just can not feel super exciting. And so that can be a struggle for some folks. Also, it takes a lot of executive functioning, let's say, to schedule a dentist appointment. So that might be something that folks struggle with. At the same time, again, like speaking to the diversity of folks who have neurodivergent brains, some of the other folks in group were like, no, absolutely not. Like my routine is very important to me. Feeling clean is very important to me, whether that's my teeth or whether that's my showering habits. I absolutely have to shower before I leave the house, or I just cannot do anything else. And so again, it's really going to vary when it comes to these activities of daily living for different folks. Okay. So we're going to have a lovely reflection question here. So I'll give you a minute or two to consider. What are some challenges or barriers you faced completing activities of daily living? Again, recognizing people of various neurotypes can struggle with these things. And then what are some of the challenges your loved one or somebody you are supporting has faced when it comes to these activities of daily living? So I'll give you a second to consider that. Right. So thank you for participating in that reflection. Next, we're going to introduce a theory that I think can be incredibly helpful, not just for neurodivergent folks, but for everybody when we consider the energy it can take to do some of these activities of daily living, especially when you layer upon, it's a theme we've been talking about this entire workshop series, just the general day-to-day stressors of kind of moving through the world as a divergent thinker when you're trying to navigate like more neurotypical spaces that can just take a lot of energy. And another way we can talk about energy is spoon theory. So routines can be hard sometimes. I think spoon theory is a helpful metaphor for explaining another factor that makes it difficult. So it's a metaphor for describing the amount of physical and or mental energy that a person has available for daily activities and tasks and how that can become limited. So you'll notice on our visual here that different activities require different levels of spoons. So let's say maybe we are having a tough time and we're experiencing what we sometimes refer to as burnout, where just our expenditure of spoons has been more than we actually had for a period of time. And we're just like running really low or we're running at a deficit. So if we only have 6 spoons that we're going into the day with, getting out of bed, getting dressed and going to school might be all somebody can reasonably do. So you can see on our little chart there, getting out of bed is going to take 1 spoon. Getting dressed is going to take another spoon. And going to school is going to take 4 whole spoons because there's getting to school, there's remembering everything that you need to bring for the day. There is actually sitting in a lecture where there might be some like sensory overwhelm or other peers that you're having to worry about. So it can just be a lot. It can be pretty draining. So sometimes doing just those couple of things can be all that feels manageable, which means some of the other activities of daily living, or let's say doing light housework or socializing, those might just feel out of the question, depending on the amount of energy somebody is going to into the day with. So the question becomes, how can we help? So we can encourage some self-care. So our loved ones or the person we're supporting can replenish their spoons or help out to potentially decrease the number of spoons it takes to do certain tasks. So this is what we're going to talk about next. What can be helpful and what can be less helpful? All right, so you see on the left-hand side, not as helpful, and then we'll review what is potentially more helpful when it comes to encouraging some support for activities of daily living, routines, replenishment of spoons, making things take less spoons. So what might not be as helpful is organizing or cleaning for somebody. So we might think, after looking at that lovely chart related to spoons, that, well, I can just kind of take that off their plate, and then they won't have to spend that energy to clean up, especially if their area is particularly messy. So the reason that doesn't work so well is because for certain neurodivergent folks, it might seem messy or it might seem kind of chaotic to a neurotypical brain. But you've probably heard this before. Like, there's just some aspects of neurodivergent thinkers that are able to really thrive in that chaos, and they know where everything is when it is a little bit more chaotic. Or sometimes, and this is a tip that can be helpful, people will put things at what we call the point of performance. So let's say you are wanting to pack your lunch for the day, but sometimes you just forget. Like, that's been something that you've noticed, is that you have all intentions of packing a lunch to bring to work or to bring to campus, and you just don't. So somebody might, as a visual reminder, put their lunch box or the thing they're taking their lunch in a really visible spot, like on the counter or like even on the stove. Before they heat up their tea for their breakfast, they're remembering, oh yeah, I need to pack my lunch. And so if you have good intentions, but you're like, this is not where this belongs, and you put it somewhere else, there goes their visual cue. Or if you try to organize something for somebody, they will get pretty frustrated because they aren't going to know where anything is if you just do it for them versus organizing or cleaning with them. So if they ask directly, like, hey, like, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed in my space, it's a little more out of control than it usually is, can you help me out with that? You could certainly pitch in. One thing kind of related to this I want to share, which I think is really fun, is for somebody in my own life. And then I shared this tip with a client. They were feeling really stressed out about laundry. So doing the laundry was hard enough, but then like the idea of putting it away was really overwhelming. So then they were just kind of, throwing it places, and then it got confusing what was clean and what was dirty. And it was just feeling like a lot. But having the spoons to like immediately after doing laundry and like folding it and putting it in drawers just felt like a lot. It was a lot of energy expenditure. So I said, well, you could always just kind of have little bins. And, if you are okay with the fact that not everything is like perfectly wrinkle free, or you could just throw it in the dryer before you wear it, you could always just like put different things in different bins and not have to like fold them and put them neatly away in drawers. Then you can also kind of see what you have, see what's clean, and see what you want to grab for the day. And they were like, that changed my life. That's really amazing. That makes my life so much easier. I don't dread doing laundry as much anymore because I have a system that's really easy for me. So I think, again, that's an example of an accommodation that you could come up with, kind of organizing or cleaning with somebody, kind of thinking about what the barriers are, and can we think creatively about a way to support you? Okay. Not as helpful, insisting we finish something before taking a break. Versus what can be more helpful is allowing for breaks along the way and setting a timer for tasks. So I think this is really key, especially when it comes to focus, attention, managing energy related to these things. I think taking breaks is just really essential. I think for everybody, honestly, but I think especially for neurodivergent thinkers, just setting some time aside, like usually 15 minutes per hour is what is generally recommended, can just help kind of motivate you to keep going versus it feeling so overwhelming. I have to sit down for 6 hours and write this paper, saying, no, just sit down for maybe 45 minutes, and then you're going to get a 15-minute break, and then see how you feel coming back to it. There's a related strategy I've been really talking to students about a lot. It's called making a visit. There's a blog post about it from the neurodivergent clinician that I really appreciate. So it's this idea of having tasks, taking a look, sitting down, and in the amount of time it takes to take a deep breath or two, you kind of decide, do I want to tackle this now or not? Because a lot of neurodivergent thinkers I work with, they really struggle with what we call kind of the cycle of doom, which is they are really worried about the fact they're procrastinating on something. They try to sit down and do it. They like physically cannot do it. And then they feel worse about it. And then, of course, their motivation is even less versus saying, I'm going to visit this task today. I'm going to see if I'm in the mood for it. And if I'm not, I can maybe do a different task or I can come back to it later. Because generally we're deciding within the first 5 seconds whether we're really up for doing something or not, right? So that's another kind of related strategy I wanted to share. Okay, so this is maybe more for my professors, teachers in the crowd, or if you're a boss of somebody who's a neurodivergent thinker. So saying, get it to me whenever you think you're being like really generous, and saying like, I know you struggle with deadlines and with maybe some time management. So I'm just going to take it easy on you. Say, get that assignment to me just whenever you can. So sounds lovely in theory, but in practice, unfortunately, what some neurodivergent thinkers need in order to get motivated is a deadline. It's that pressure of time. So while it is really generous, and I really encourage all educators to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to certain deadlines, and this is a very common accommodation that students have if they're working with our Disability Access Center for formal accommodations at the university, really saying like you have 25% more time for this assignment, so this is the due date now. Or saying, I know this, you said this is half done. How long do you think it's going to reasonably take you to finish it, given everything you have going on this week? And even just negotiating that, but giving a deadline is really important. All right, so what can be less helpful is saying everyone struggles with this, or I don't know why you're complaining about this task of laundry that should be so easy. Like, just fold your stuff, man. When it comes out of the dryer, just fold it. Not helpful. It's not helpful for anybody. Validating the fact that it's difficult, even if it might not be difficult for you and your brain. Again, natural variation exists. So it might not be easy for that person, and really noticing that and validating that can be just really helpful and really important. And then brainstorming ideas again together in order to help. All right. So speaking of that, notice, emphasize, and build upon strengths. Positive reinforcement is awesome. And sometimes positive reinforcement is just noticing, hey, like I noticed that you've been leaving your lunchbox out on the counter and you've been bringing your lunch more often. That's awesome. Or, you can get some natural reinforcers going with the fact that my laundry doesn't feel overwhelming anymore. Like, it's not all over my room the way it used to be. It's in these like little bins that I'm working out as a great system. So positive reinforcement is pretty great. When invited, body double or be an accountability partner. So body doubling is a huge strategy I talk to a lot of students about. So this idea of, even if you're working on different assignments, you're not in the same class, bringing a friend to the library, setting that Pomodoro timer for 60 minutes. After 45, you get a 15-minute break. You can walk around the library with that friend. You can go grab a bagel or a cup of coffee. Just having that other person there can sometimes be a nice cue, like, oh, that person's working, I need to be working. So body doubling is awesome. If you can't do it in person, there's various kind of online ways to body double. A lot of young people have set up through the service Discord, some ways to connect with people from across the country, just to kind of sit down with other people electronically and body double. So there's some great resources out there. If sharing a living space with somebody, so if you're one of my partners, you're one of my roommates, you're one of my friends of somebody who has a neurodivergent thinker in their life, recognize the role of spoons and clearly establish some non-negotiables. And then if you can, just be able to like let the rest go. Like, maybe it really bothers you to walk by your roommate's room and it's a chaotic mess. You might just need to deal with that, my friend. But if you have aunts and they're leaving dishes in the sink all the time, that might be a non-negotiable. And is there some sort of like body doubling, like, hey, let's go do the dishes together, or while you do the dishes, I'm going to clean out our disgusting microwave. So just being able to support in some of those tasks and chores might be helpful as well. All right, and finally, encourage spoon management and replenishment via burnout prevention and self-care strategies. And we're going to talk more about self-care strategies in our next session. So until then, be well, WWU, and take good care.